Only a few people, however, actually know him well. I have been acquainted with him for 6 years, originally as a financial analyst covering Berkshire Hathaway stock. Over time our relationship has turned friendly, and now I will get to know him better still. We are sitting in Warren's office because he is not going to write a book. The unruly eyebrows punctuate his words as he says repeatedly, "You'll do a better job than I would, Alice. I'm glad you're writing this book, not me." Why he would say that is something that will eventually become clear. In the meantime, we start with the matter closest to his heart. Where did it come from, Warren? Caring so much about making money. His eyes go distant for a few seconds, thoughts traveling inward, flip through the mental files. Warren begins to tell his story. Balzac said that behind every great fortune lies a crime. That's not true at Berkshire. He leaps out of his chair to bring home the thought, crossing the room in a couple of strides. Landing on a mustardy gold brocade armchair, he leans forward, more like a teenager bragging about his first romance than a 72-year-old financier. How to interpret the story, who else to interview, what to write, the book is up to me. He talks at length about human nature and memory's frailty, then says, "Whenever my version is different from somebody else's, Alice, use the less flattering version." Among the many lessons, some of the best come simply from observing him. Here is the first: humility disarm. In the end, there won't be too many reasons to choose the less flattering version, but when I do, human nature, not memory's frailty, is usually why. One of those occasions happened at Sun Valley in 1999. Warren Buffett stepped out of his car and pulled his suitcase from the trunk. He walked through the gate onto the airport's tarmac, where a gleaming white Gulfstream IV jet, the size of a regional commercial airliner and one of the largest private aircraft in the world in 1999. One of the pilots grabbed the suitcase from him to stow in the cargo hold. Every new pilot who flew with Buffett was shocked to see him carrying his own luggage from a car he drove himself. He climbed the boarding stairs and headed to a seat next to a window, which he would not glance out of at any time during the flight. His mood was buoyant. He had been anticipating this trip for weeks. Inside, his son Peter and daughter-in-law Jennifer, his daughter Susan and her boyfriend, and 2 of his grandchildren swiveled their seats away from the curved wall panels to give themselves more space as the flight attendant brought drinks from the galley, which was stocked with the family's favorite snacks and beverages. A pile of magazines lay nearby on the sofa. She brought Buffett an armload of newspapers instead, along with a basket of potato chips and a cherry coat that matched his red Nebraska sweater. He complimented her, chatted for a few minutes to ease her nervousness at flying for the first time with her boss, and told her that she could let the co-pilot know that they were ready to take off. Then he buried his head in a newspaper as the plane rolled down the runway and ascended to 40,000 feet. For the next 2 hours, 6 people hummed around him, watching videos, talking, and making phone calls, while the flight attendant set out linens and bud vases filled with orchids on the bird's eye maple dining tables before returning to the galley to prepare lunch. Buffett never moved. He sat reading, hidden behind his newspapers, as if he were alone in his study at home. They were flying in a $30 million airborne palace called a fractional jet. As many as 8 owners shared it, but it served as part of a fleet, so all the owners could fly at once if they wished. The pilots in the cockpit, the crew that maintained it, the schedulers who got it to the gate on 6 hours' notice, and the flight attendant who served their lunch all worked for NetJets, which belonged to Warren Buffett's company, Berkshire Hathaway. Sometime later, the GIV crossed the Snake River Plain and approached the Sawtooth Mountains, baking in the summer sun. It sailed through the bright clear air into the Wood River Valley, descending to 8,000 feet, where it started to buck on the mountain wave of turbulence thrown into the sky by the brown foothills beneath. Buffett read on, unperturbed, as the plane rocked and his family jerked about in their seats. Brush dotted higher altitudes of a second ridge of hills and rows of pines began their march up the ridges between ravines on the leeward side. The family grinned with anticipation. As the aircraft descended through the narrowing slot between the rising mountain peaks ahead, the midday sun cast the plane's lengthening shadow over the old mining town of Haley, Idaho. A few seconds later, the wheels touched down on the Friedman Memorial Airport runway. By the time the Buffetts had bounded down the stairs onto the tarmac, squinting in the July sunshine, two SUVs had driven through the gate and pulled up alongside the jet, driven by men and women from Hertz. They all wore the company's gold and black shirts. Instead of Hertz, however, the logo said, Allen & Company. The grandchildren bounced on their heels as the pilots unloaded the luggage in Buffett's red and white Coca-Cola golf bag. Then he and the others said goodbye and climbed into the SUVs. Bypassing Sun Valley Aviation, pocket-sized trailer at the runway's southern end, they swung through the gate onto the road that led to the peaks beyond. About 2 minutes had elapsed since the plane's wheels first touched the runway. Right on schedule, 8 minutes later, another jet followed theirs, headed to its own runway parking spot. Throughout the golden afternoon, jet after jet cruised into Idaho from the south and east or swung around the peaks from the west and descended into Haley. As the afternoon waned, dozens of huge, gleaming white aircraft lined the runway like a shop window full of tycoon's toys. The Buffetts followed the trail blazed by earlier SUVs a few miles onward from the airport to the tiny town of Ketchum, near the turnoff to the Elkhorn Pass. A few miles later, they rounded Dollar Mountain, where a green oasis appeared, nestled among the brown slopes. Here amid the lacy pines and shimmering aspens lay Sun Valley, the mountain's most fabled resort. The tide of families they were joining this Tuesday afternoon all had some connection to Allen & Company, a boutique investment bank that specialized in the media and communications industries. Allen & Company had put together some of the biggest mergers in Hollywood, and for more than a decade had been hosting an annual series of discussions and seminars mingled with outdoor recreation at Sun Valley for its clients and friends. Herbert Allen, the firm's CEO, invited only people he liked, or those with whom he was at least willing to do business. Thus the conference was always filled with faces both famous and rich. Hollywood folk like Candice Bergen, Tom Hanks, and Ron Howard, media moguls like Barry Diller, Rupert Murdoch, Robert Iger, and Michael Eisner, pedigreed journalists like Tom Brokaw, Diane Sawyer, and Charlie Rose, and technology titans like Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, and Andy Grove. A pack of reporters lay in wait for them every year outside the Sun Valley Lodge. The reporters had traveled a day earlier to the Newark, New Jersey, airport or some similar embarkation point to board a commercial flight to Salt Lake City, then raced to Concourse's bullpen to sit amid a crush of people waiting for flights to places like Sioux City, Iowa, until it was time to cram themselves into a prop plane for the 1-hour Bronco ride to Sun Valley. On arrival, their plane was directed to the opposite end of the airport next to the tennis court-sized terminal, where they witnessed a crew of tanned young Allen & Company employees dressed in pastel, SV99, polo shirts and white shorts welcoming the handful of Allen & Company guests who were arriving early on commercial flights. These were instantly recognizable among the other passengers. Men in Western boots and Paul Stewart shirts with jeans, women wearing goatskin suede jackets and marble-sized turquoise beads. The Allen staff had memorized the newcomers' faces from photographs supplied in advance. They hugged people they had gotten to know in years past as if they were old friends, whisked away the guests' bags, and led their charges off to the SUVs lined up steps away in the parking lot. The reporters went to the rental car desk, then drove to the lodge, by now acutely conscious of their lowly status. For the next few days, many areas of Sun Valley would be marked as private, blocked from prying eyes by closed doors, omnipresent security, hanging flower baskets, and large potted plants. The reporters would lurk around the fringes, noses pressed against the bushes. Ever since Disney's Michael Eisner and Capital Cities ABC's Tom Murphy had dreamed up a deal to merge their companies at Sun Valley 95, the way the conference was often referred to as if it had engulfed the entire resort, which, in a way, it had. The press coverage had grown until it took on the artificially giddy atmosphere of a business version of Cannes. Sun Valley was about more than making deals, though the deals garnered most of the press. Every year the rumors sizzled that a deal was hatching at the mysterious conclave in the Idaho mountains. Thus, as the SUVs rolled one by one into the port cocher, the reporters peered through the front windows to see who was inside. When someone newsworthy arrived, they chased their prey into the lodge, brandishing cameras and microphones. The press quickly recognized Warren Buffett as he stepped out of his SUV. The DNA of the conference had him built into it, said his friend Don Keogh, chairman of Allen & Company Squared. Most of the press people liked Buffett, who went out of his way not to be disliked by anyone. He also intrigued them. His public image was that of a simple man, and he seemed genuine. Yet he lived a complicated life. He owned 5 homes but occupied only 2 of them. Somehow he had wound up having, in effect, 2 wives. He spoke in homely aphorisms with a kindly twinkle in his eye and had a notably loyal group of friends, yet along the way he had earned a reputation as a tough, even icy dealmaker. He seemed to shun publicity yet managed to attract more of it than almost any other businessman on earth. He jetted around the country in AGIV, often attended celebrity events, and had many famous friends, yet said that he preferred Omaha, hamburgers, and thrift. He spoke of his success as being based on a few simple investing ideas and tap dancing to work with enthusiasm every day, but if that was so, why had nobody else been able to replicate it? Buffett, as always, gave the photographers a willing wave and a grandfatherly smile. They captured him on film, then began peering at the next car. The Buffetts drove around to their condominium, one of the coveted Wildflower Group, where Herbert Allen housed his VIPs. Inside, the usual loot awaited them, a pile of Allen & Company SV99 logo jackets, baseball caps, zip fleeces, polo shirts, every year a different color, and a zippered notebook. Despite his fortune of more than $30 billion, enough to buy 1,000 of those GIVs parked out at the airport, Buffett liked few things more than getting a free golf shirt from a friend. He took the time to look carefully through this year's swag. Of even more interest to him, however, was the personal note that Herbert Allen sent to each guest, and the perfectly organized conference notebook that explained what Sun Valley had in store for him this year. Time to the second, organized to the hilt, crisp as Herbert Allen's French cuffs, Buffett's schedule was laid out hour by hour, day by day. The notebook spelled out the conference speakers and topics, until now a closely guarded secret, and the luncheons and dinners that he would attend. Unlike the other guests, Buffett knew much of this in advance, but still he wanted to see what the notebook had to say. Herbert Allen, the so-called Lord of Sun Valley, and the conference's quiet choreographer, set the tone of casual luxury that pervaded the event. People always cited him for high principles, brilliance, good advice, and generosity. "You'd like to die with the respect of somebody like Herbert Allen," a guest gushed. Afraid of being disinvited to the conference, attendees rarely went beyond vague hints that Herbert was unusual, restless, impatient, and possessed of an oversized personality. Standing in the shadow of his tall, wiry frame, one had to strain to keep up with the words that crackled forth like machine gun fire. He barked questions, then cut off respondents mid-sentence, lest they waste a second of his time. He specialized in saying the unsayable. Ultimately, Wall Street will be eliminated, he once told a reporter, although he ran a Wall Street bank. He referred to his competitors as hot dog vendors. To the power of 4, Allen kept his firm small, and his bankers staked their own money on their deals. This unconventional approach made the firm a partner rather than a mere servant to its clients, who were the elite of Hollywood and the media world. Thus, when he played host, his guests felt privileged, rather than like captives pitched by salesmen at every turn. Allen and Company arranged a detailed social agenda every year built around each guest's personal network of relationships, which the firm understood, and the new people that Allen's majordomos felt each should meet. Unspoken hierarchies dictated the distances of the guests' condominiums from the inn where meetings were held, which meals the guests were invited to attend, and with whom they would be seated. Buffett's friend Tom Murphy referred to this kind of event as elephant bumping. Anytime a bunch of big shots get together, says Buffett, you can get people to come, because it reassures them if they're at an elephant bumping that they're an elephant too. To the power of 5, Sun Valley was always very reassuring, because unlike most elephant bumps, one could not buy one's way in. The result was a sort of faux democracy of the elite. Part of the thrill of coming was to see who was not invited, and, more thrilling still, who was disinvited. Yet within their stratum, people did develop genuine relationships. Allen and Company fostered conviviality through lavish entertainment, beginning on the first evening, when the guests donned Western gear, climbed into old-fashioned horse-drawn wagons, and followed cowboys up a winding trail onto Trail Creek Cabin Meadow. There, Herbert Allen or one of his 2 sons greeted the guests as the sun began to set. Cowboys entertained the children with rope tricks while the Sun Valley Old Guard reunited and welcomed new guests.